This is my third and final lecture on the historical books, the novellas that are in the Bible. And the first is Tobit. It's a deuterocanonical book, one that we Catholics have that Protestants don't have. It's not in the Hebrew Bible. It was written in Greek. Protestants call this apocryphal. The Jewish Old Testament eventually includes law, prophet, and writings. The law was the first group of books to be stabilized. At the time of Jesus, the Sadducees still did not accept the prophets as scripture, whereas the Pharisees did. The writings was the last group to be stabilized, and the Jewish canon in Alexandria was larger than the Jewish canon in Palestine. The Catholic Old Testament draws from this expanded canon, and the Orthodox draw even more from it, like 3rd and 4th Maccabees. Catholic New Testament and Protestant New Testament are exactly the same. The reason our Catholic Old Testament has 7 additional books is that we are drawing from the larger Jewish canon of Alexandria rather than the smaller Jewish canon from Palestine. So in Tobit, we get the story of Tobit's virtue. He's a member of the 10 tribes, deported to Nineveh. He's generous to the poor. In the middle of his meal, he hears that someone has died, and he gets up and goes and buries them. In the next section, we hear of his trials. He's sleeping outside on a warm night. A bird poops in his eyes, and he goes blind. His wife gets a job because he can't support the family anymore, and she gets a bonus, a goat, from her work. Tobit hears it bleating and accuses her of stealing it, and they have a big fight. Tobit prays for death. I'd rather be dead than go on living blind and being insulted by my wife. Then the next, there's a young lady named Sarah. She lives in a city named Ecbatana. She's been married 7 times. All of her husbands have died on the wedding night, strangled by a demon named Asmodeus, who has the hots for her, and he doesn't want any human being to marry her. She's insulted by her maid, who says that you're the one who kills your husbands on the wedding night, and Sarah is so distraught that she prays for death. At this point, Raphael is introduced to the story. God hears the prayers of both Tobit and Sarah, who are wishing for death, and he sends his angel Raphael to deal with their problems. Named angels and named demons are a post-exilic phenomenon. So we know these stories are late. Before the exile, there was only the angel of God or the angel of the Lord. This angel is Raphael, and literally his name means God heals. Rapha is heal. In modern Hebrew, if you want to see a doctor, you want a rophe, which is the present participle. Rapha is the past of the same verb. So a journey is proposed. Tobit speaks to his son Tobiah. And now, son, I wish to inform you that I have deposited a great sum of money with Gabri's son Gabael at Rajas in Media. Do not be discouraged, my child, because of our poverty. You will be a rich man if you fear God, avoid all sin, and do what is right before the Lord, and if you go get this money. So he meets Raphael. Now, Tobiah is young. They want him to have a companion. He goes out and finds Raphael, who looks like an ordinary person. Tobiah said to him, "Who are you, young man?" He replied, "I'm an Israelite, one of your kinsmen. I have come here to work." Tobiah said, "Do you know the way to Media?" The other replied, "Yes, I've been there many times. I know the place and I know all the routes. I have traveled often to Media." So much of the fun of the story is in the double meaning in Raphael's lines. Yeah, he goes there all the time. Raphael is introduced to Tobit. And Tobit says, "Brother, tell me please, what family and tribe are you from?" Raphael said, "Why do you wish to need a tribe and a family? Or are you looking for a hired man to travel with your son?" Tobit replied, "I wish to know truthfully whose son you are, brother, and what your name is." Raphael answered, "I'm Azariah, son of Hananiah, the elder of one of your own kinsmen." And the NAB note says that Azariah means Yahweh helps. Hananiah is Yahweh is merciful. Then chapter 6, the fish, they get near a pond and they're going to drink. And on the journey, Tobiah is attacked by a giant fish. The two overcome it and eat it. And Raphael's instruction is to save the fish guts for later. Chapter 7, they arrive at the house of Raguel, Sarah's father. Raguel tells Tobiah that he's the next of kin, but he warns him that his daughter has not had good luck with husbands. Then we get the marriage of Tobiah and Sarah. And on their wedding night, we get the expulsion of the demon to Upper Egypt, that's South Egypt, where he is bound by Raphael. To get him out of the room, Tobit burns some of the fish guts on the fire, and evidently demons hate the smell. So he gets out and heads for Egypt, where Raphael ties him up. Then there's a prayer on their wedding night. Lord God, know that I'm taking this woman not out of lust or anything, but to be faithful to your commandments, to increase and multiply, and so on. It's an optional reading for Catholic weddings. Beautiful prayer. So the first happy endings, Raguel has dug a grave just in case, and in the middle of the night he sends a maid in to check on them, and she finds that both the young couple are alive, and so we get his prayer of praise when he finds both bride and groom are living. Then in chapter 9 he gets the money from Gabal's house, and chapter 10 is about his parents' anxiety. Mom is saying, we never should have sent the boy on that journey. He's never coming back. Build up a little suspense. And then in chapter 11, the second happy ending, Tobit is cured by blindness. It turns out that fish guts are good not only for chasing away demons, but they also heal bird poop blindness. And then, toward the end, reveals, as you can tell, these stories are a lot of fun, reveals his identity. They say, how can we thank you? And he says, I can tell you that when you, Tobit, and Sarah prayed, it was I who presented and read the record of your prayer before the glory of the Lord, and I did the same when you used to bury the dead. When you did not hesitate to get up and leave your dinner and go bury the dead, I was sent to put you to the test. At the same time, however, God commissioned me to heal you and your daughter-in-law, Sarah. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who enter and serve before the glory of the Lord. Stricken with fear, the 2 men fell to the ground, but Raphael said to them, no need to fear. You are safe. Thank God now and forever. The conclusion, the book ends with the prophecies of Tobit. He prophesies the destruction of Nineveh, the destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon, that Jerusalem and the temple will be rebuilt, and that all the nations of the world will be converted. When this was written, the first 3 were already ancient history. The conversion of all the nations of the world hasn't happened yet. And chapter 13 is his hymn to God. Now, Judith, in the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians in the great city of Nineveh in the days of Arphaxad, who ruled over the Medes in Ecbatana. That's like when Winston Churchill was president of the United States and Juan Doe was president of Mexico. I could probably get away with this with some high school students. 300 or 400 years from now, how many people would see the problem if a lecturer said when Winston Churchill was president of the United States and Juan Doe was president of Mexico? Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon, not of Assyria. He never lived in Nineveh. Arphaxad, according to Tony Craven's article in the New Jerome Biblical Commentary, is an invented character. This book, like Tobit, is a post-exilic novel. In chapters 2 and 3, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyria, sends the general Holofernes, and all the nations of the world are conquered and submit to him. In chapter 4, the Israelites are preparing their defense, which is coordinated by the high priest. Now, if it had really been an ancient time, the king would have been calling the shots. After the exile, they weren't allowed to have a king, and so the high priest was the chief official. This reflects a post-exilic situation. There's a war council versus the Israelites in the pagan camp, and Achior gives a speech, and he says, "So now, my Lord and Master, if these people are at fault and are sinning against their God, and if we can verify this offense of theirs, then we shall be able to conquer them. But if they're not a guilty nation, then your lordship should keep his distance. Otherwise, their Lord and God will shield them and will become a laughingstock of the whole world." You can't conquer the Jews when they're being holy. And the response of Holofernes is, "Send Achior to live with the Jews, and after I conquer them, we'll kill you then." So we get the siege of Bethlehem in chapter 7. Everybody's ready to give in. But Uzziah said to them, "Courage, brothers, let's wait 5 days more for the Lord our God to show his mercy. He won't utterly forsake us." At this point, Judith, which her name means Jewish lady, Judith is introduced. When she hears of this decision, she gives a speech. She has a pious explanation for suffering and a patriotic exhortation. Who are we to set a time for God? 5 days. The defense of the temple in Jerusalem depends on us at this outpost. We've been being good. We have every hope God will help us. Suffering is how God tests his people. Recall how he tested Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Uzziah's response is, the people have made us swear an oath that in 5 days we're going to quit. So even though you've said wise things, lady, we're going to quit in 5 days. So Judith tells her plan. She tells the leaders that she's going to go out to the enemy camp with her maid that very night. "You must not inquire into what I'm doing, for I will not tell you until my plan is accomplished." So the rulers say, "Go in peace, and may the Lord God go before you to take vengeance upon your enemies." Then they withdrew from the tent and returned to their posts. So Judith's action, she begins with a prayer. She takes a bath. Where did she get water when everybody in the city is dying of thirst? She puts on her perfume, her jewelry, her most beautiful clothes. She is now dressed to kill, literally it turns out. She packs kosher food so she will not be defiled by pagan food. She goes out the city. She's captured and brought to the general. Her speech to Holofernes reminds him of what Achior said. She tells him that her people have sinned, and they're even planning more sins. "As soon as I, your handmaid, learned this, I fled from them. God has sent me to perform with you such deeds that people throughout the world will be astonished on hearing them." Part of the fun of the story is the double meaning in Judith's words. "Your handmaid is indeed a God-fearing woman, serving the God of heaven night and day. Now I will remain with you, my Lord, but each night your handmaid will go out to the ravine to pray to God. He will tell me when the Israelites have committed their crimes. Then I will come and let you know, so that you may go out with your whole force, and not one of them will be able to withstand you." So Judith's conduct, she refuses food and drink from Holofernes. He asks, "But what if you run out of food?" Judith answers, "As surely as you, my Lord, live, your handmaid will not use up her supplies till the Lord accomplishes by my hand what he has determined." So she sleeps in his tent. Before dawn, she sends word to Holofernes. Obviously, she's in the guest room in his tent. She needs to go out to pray. Holofernes gives orders to the guard to let her to go out each morning before dawn to pray. She does this for 3 days. Then we have the banquet in chapter 12. Holofernes gets drunk and sends his eunuch Bagoas to invite Judith. Thereupon she proceeded to put on her festive garments and all her feminine ornaments. Meanwhile her maid went ahead and spread out on the ground for her in front of Holofernes the fleece Bagoas had furnished for her daily use in reclining at her dinner. Then Judith came in and reclined on it. The heart of Holofernes was in rapture over her, and his spirit was shaken. He was burning with desire to possess her, for he had been biding his time to seduce her from the day he saw her. Holofernes said to her, "Drink and be merry with us." Judith replies, "I will gladly drink, my lord, for at no time since I was born have I enjoyed life as much as I do today." She then took the things her maid had prepared. She ate and drank in his presence. Holofernes, charmed by her, drank a great quantity of wine, more than he'd ever drunk in a single day in his whole life. So he is drunk, unconscious. Judas says a prayer. Then she went to the bedpost near the head of Holofernes, taking his sword from it, drew it to the bed, grasped the hair of his head, and said, "Strengthen me this day, O Lord, God of Israel." Then with all her might she struck him twice on the neck and cut off his head. She rolled his body off the bed and took the canopy from its supports. Soon afterwards she came out and handed over the head of Holofernes to her maid, who put it in her food pouch, and the two went out together as they were accustomed to do for prayer. They passed through the camp. Then when they're back in Bethulia, she shows the head to the leaders and the people. And in verse 16, lest they worry, she says, "I got him with my face. As the Lord lives, who has protected me from the path I have followed, I swear that it was my face that seduced Holofernes to his ruin, and that he did not sin with me to my defilement or disgrace." Some of the artwork on Judith, classic and modern, shows a bit more than her face. You can Google some nice pictures of Judith. She is dressed to kill. So Israel defeats the Babylonians. The Jews attack, and they attempt to wake up Holofernes, only to find out he has no head, and they are routed. And the conclusion, Judith lives to be 105, remains a widow for her whole life. The New Testament will honor widow. And the final remarks, to get the main point of this novel, you have to read the speeches closely. Final historical novel or novella is Esther. There are two versions, Hebrew and Greek. God is not mentioned in the Hebrew version, which is what's in the Tanakh and in Protestant Bibles. Greek scribes added prayers to make the story more pious. The version in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles thus has these extra things. So if you would open your Catholic Bible, New American Bible, to the book of Esther, what you would find is, first there's a chapter A. Then there's chapter 1, 2, chapter 3 starts, then there's chapter B, then 3 finishes, then chapter 4, then chapter C and D, then 5, 6, 7, and 8 begins, then chapter E, then 8 finishes, then 9, 10, and chapter F. Okay, the numbered chapters, those are the ones the Protestants have. They're written in Hebrew. The lettered chapters are those that only we Catholics have, and they're much more pious, you'll find out. So the introductory elements in chapter A, the story set in the Persian Empire. Esther lives among the Jewish exiles with her uncle Mordecai. Mordecai uncovers a plot to assassinate the king, and he's promoted. Chapters 1 and 2, how Esther becomes. There's Ahasuerus, the king, is bragging at a banquet how beautiful his wife is. He summons her to come wearing her beautiful crown, and Queen Vashti refuses to come. So they say, what are we going to do? If word gets out that the king's wife doesn't obey him, all of our wives won't obey us either. Now, this is a man's world, so they depose Queen Vashti. They have a beauty contest, and don't you know, Esther is made queen. So Mordecai and Haman. Haman notices, he's an official, that everyone bows down to him except Mordecai. Mordecai refuses to worship a human being. Now this is novelistic. Historically, Jews had no problems bowing down to emperors and other rulers. Haman finds out that Mordecai is a Jew. He decides not to kill just Mordecai, but he's going to kill all the Jews. The king gives Haman his seal ring and tells him to take care of the problem, so he writes up to destroy all the Jews on a certain day and seals it with the king's seal. They cast the lot, which is pur in Hebrew, to determine the date on which all the Jews will be killed. And this is the origin of the Jewish festival. To make a word, a masculine word plural, you add im to the end. So Purim is the Feast of Lots. In the king's name, Haman sends out a letter. All Jews are to be killed on a certain day, and chapter B is a copy of the letter. Mordecai seeks Esther's help. Esther has not told the king she's Jewish. Mordecai warns her of her duty to help her people. That's why God has made her queen. Esther explains she's not allowed to see the king whenever she wants. If she goes in there unsummoned and the king doesn't extend his scepter, the penalty is death. So Esther sent back to Mordecai the response, "Go and assemble all the Jews who are in Susa. Fast on my behalf, all of you, not eating or drinking night or day for 3 days." So this is a real fast. "And I and my maids will also fast in the same way. Thus prepared, I will go to the king contrary to the law. If I perish, I perish." And there's a black spiritual. If I perish, I perish. I am going to see the king. Now, in their spiritual, the king they're going to see is God. But in Esther, it's her husband that she's going to see. So her preparation to see the king, we have the prayers, and then the prayer of Esther. "Be mindful to us, O Lord. Manifest yourself in the time of our distress and give me courage. King of gods and ruler of every power, put in my mouth persuasive words in the presence of the lion, and turn his heart to hatred for our enemy, so that he and those who are in league with him may perish." We read this in the lectionary, and it's not at all obvious who the lion is. It's her husband. Esther and the king. So she's now dressed in her very best dress and anointed and smelling good. And the king extends the scepter, says, "Esther, what is it, honey?" And she says, "I want to have a dinner party, just you and me, and let's invite Haman." And the king is thinking, these silly women, they just endanger their life to have a dinner party. And Haman, he's thinking, "Oh man, my star is rising. I'm dining with the king and the queen." About this time, the story is interrupted by Mordecai's reward. Before the banquet, the king can't sleep. The annals are read to him, and he hears how Mordecai was rewarded for saving the previous king's life. And so, how should such a man be rewarded? And Haman says, "Oh, you ought to give him a nice robe and a big horse and have an official lead him around and say everyone has to praise this official." And so the king says, "That is a great idea, Haman. That's what I want you to do for Mordecai." Haman, of course, thought that the king was going to honor him. But now he has to take his hated enemy around and lead him around. Then we have the banquet, and in the middle of the banquet, Esther has a crying fit. The king says, "What's the matter, Esther, honey?" He says, "Oh, someone wants to kill me, and not just me, they want to kill all my people too. Boo-hoo-hoo." And the king says, "Who would dare do such things?" She points across the table, Haman, and it says, his knees were knocking and his teeth were chattering, and the king is so furious that he gets up and goes out of the room. And so now he's kneeling down beside Esther, and he's got hold of her dress, and he's pleading for mercy. About that time, the king comes back in and says, "Hey, right in my own house, he's trying to rape my own wife." So, the results. The Jews get to kill all their enemies. So the king signs another decree and sends it out. Everybody who was getting ready to kill the Jews, now they get to get killed. And Haman is hanged high on a gibbet which he had built for Mordecai. Harry Truman said something about if some of the generals didn't follow his orders, he would hang them as high as Haman. That's a biblical reference. Amy Jill Levine has warned how this story, wrongly interpreted, has resulted in Jewish violence against Palestinians. And it was after the Feast of Purim that an Israeli settler took an Uzi machine gun into the mosque in Hebron and slaughtered dozens of Muslims as they were at prayer. So this story, wrongly interpreted, can lead to violence and destruction. The basic idea of Purim is it's when you have a good time. Singing and dancing in the synagogues, costume parties, treats for children, including Osne Hammond, Hammond's ears, which are like sweet pastries baked in the shape of ears. So that is my lecture on the third class of what we call historical books, but I hope that you see that they're highly novelistic.